Katie Schide, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm realizing we haven't caught up for a Eurotrack episode in a while, so I'm kind of embarrassed that I've been off the grid for that.
Well, me too. And for listeners, viewers that regularly tune in, we were talking offline, and hopefully we can do something around Templiers / Grand Raid later this month, early next. So stay tuned on that front. This is it's a random place to start, but I was thinking about how at this year's race, anyone who's in that like top 3, top 10 finishing spot, you're finishing in a sea of people. And maybe this is obvious for pro athletes, but for someone in my position or fellow fans, in terms of where you go next, what happens after all of your finish line duties are finished and all those theatrics are over? Like, does the race kind of shepherd you into this other building? Do you hang out? Like, what happens?
To be honest, I mean, I don't want to criticize UTMB too much, but they don't really it's not really set up that well for people to not feel good at the end of the race. There's like nowhere to lay down, and they didn't even have water this year, like readily available. I had to like really ask for it. Um, so yeah, I actually just immediately left for doping control for drug testing because there was nowhere to lay down and they had places to lay down in the doping control area. So yeah, I quickly got in a car and went over to the building with the testing. But then I felt fine, so I didn't need to lay down. And after that was done, it's pretty uneventful. Like Jarmon's dad drove me back to where we were staying, and yeah, then I was just here in our apartment, and we actually didn't really have any food here, so that was kind of rough. So I was kind of like trying to eat random things because I didn't really feel comfortable going to the grocery store. And then after that, I actually went to go see Abby in Valersine at the aid station because we're staying close to Valersine. So that was my evening
Gotcha.
after the race.
I think I had it in my head. At least you got to go into a car, right? Because I think I had it in my head that, wow, what if for someone like Vincent or Katie or Ruth, Marion, anybody that's in that top position, there's still a lot of people, encircling the finish. So, would you have to sort of fend for yourself and wade through all of that back to an Airbnb? And maybe this changes in future years and there's more of a system, but that would be to me so daunting. Like, I've just finished this 100-mile loop around Mount Blanc. I've won the race. All eyes are on me. And now I have to like continue to put on a public face and not like throw up and stuff, going to wherever I am heading next.
Yeah, UTMB is actually pretty good at like having cars around to drive you. Even after the award ceremony, they have cars lined up so you can go right from the podium ceremony into a car and be taken somewhere. You don't have to like exit through everyone. So that in that way, they're pretty like on top of it. But just for that, they could still use a bed at the finish line.
Gotcha. And you said, so you hopped back on course. So was it Abbey Hall? Like, you're going to Valersine to sort of cheer on her race or watch the rest of UTMB unfold?
Yeah, I went to see Abby at Valersine. Yeah,
Right on.
with Coop and her husband Cordis.
Another thing that I was thinking about, again, this is, I don't know why like publicity is on my mind, but just from like a publicity standpoint, ton of cameras on course. And from a fan standpoint, watching the live stream, it was amazing in the sense that we got to be right there with you. It was incredible in that sense. But then of course, like, I think about your situation and I'm wondering how much of an issue it is from a privacy standpoint. And I guess I'm wondering more specifically about the challenge of getting to be yourself out there and go through all the emotions of, joy, suffering, anything in between, versus needing to kind of put on masks to sort of play well for the cameras. Is that something that you have to contend with? Does it bother you? Is it a non-issue? I've just been watching the live stream. I was fascinated.
Yeah, it's a good question because I think in my first two UTMBs, or even not even just UTMB, but other races too, I really felt like I needed to be smiling and like wave to everyone and show, oh, I'm so happy, I'm smiling. I try to like kind of please everyone. And I think at some point I realized like maybe it was through crewing Charmont and seeing more of the men's race. Like none of these guys are smiling. Like, why do I feel like I have to smile at everyone? I mean, of course, when I see someone that is important to me or I really like and I'm happy to see them, I smile because I legitimately am happy to see them. But I don't need to smile at every single person I pass if I don't know them. You can still like wave or say thanks and not like do this whole show. And at some point I kind of just let go of that and was like, I'm here to like race and I don't need to like please everybody who's on the side of the trail. Even when I'm cheering for a race, if I cheer for someone and they're not smiling, I'm remembering like, well, I don't care. Like, of course they're not smiling. They're like trying really hard. Why would I expect them to smile to me or, wave or something? So over the years, I've kind of like let that go. And I think I'm able to just like be in my own space and kind of keep like a neutral face or just whatever feels comfortable or natural and care less about how that looks outwardly.
That's an interesting way to process it, because I have to imagine the alternative is that it weighs on you and it's an energy suck and you're no longer just focusing on your race. You have to also think about being performative. So that's interesting. Were there any places on course where you were alone in the sense that there wasn't any media on you? Or was it like from the time the gun goes off to the time I cross the finish line, the spotlight is there end to end?
No, yeah, one of the best parts is once you leave Lake Contamine, there's this huge, which is the first aid station about 3 hours in. There's this huge tunnel that's crazy. It's all the photos of the night when there's tons of people around. It's at Notre Dame. Once you leave that point, you don't see anyone, just the aid stations basically, until Les Chapieux, which is just on the other side of that climb. And after that, you really don't see anyone until Courmayeur. So there's this huge section where you basically see nobody for like 7 hours, except for this one aid station. And I love that part because then you really feel like you're in the race, like you're really in your space, and there's no distractions, and it's at night. And I spent that entire time alone. I didn't run actually after Col du Bonhomme. I didn't run with anybody until at all for the rest of the race.
Last question on sort of the media side of things. You've now completed the loop around Mont Blanc, I think 4 times. Fact check me on that. But has the media spectacle stayed the same? Has it gotten even more intense? Like, could you look back to your first UTMB and think, wow, like there was a lot less attention on this race then versus now? Or like has it been the same throughout and you've just kind of gotten used to it?
I think it's hard for me to compare because I wasn't as much in the spotlight in the first 2 races. So maybe for sure it's been, I think in general, the race hasn't totally exploded in terms of media coverage, at least maybe in France, because it's always been huge. It definitely increases every year, but I don't think it's taken like a huge step, like a drastic step since 2019. There's definitely more professional athletes. So the brand, like there's more focus from brands. And but I wasn't as much in the spotlight in 2019, 2021. When Courtney's around, it kind of takes some of the eyes off the rest of us, which is pretty nice.
This was a hot topic post-race, at least in some of the circles that I was hanging out in. And it basically revolved around whether it's ultimately a factor or a non-factor to have fellow female competitors to run consistently with deep into the race. And I think that's been a rarity for you, especially in the last few years. I think the last opportunity that comes to mind was when you got to run with Courtney for the first 25 to 30-ish miles at Western last year. And I guess like I have a couple questions. A, is this a good question or debate to have? Like, do you think the situation is just fine keying off male competitors at any given stage? Like, should we do something significant like change the start time of the women's race to see how that would change overall dynamics? I'd love to kind of hear your opinions here.
I think that's just where we're at in terms of the density of the women's field. You see people can kind of, if someone's having a really good day, they can like really break away, or there's just not as many people, so it's hard to group up. I think we see more at Western states because there's the race is shorter and there's fewer factors outside of fitness that separate people.
Yeah.
So I think that you see the women having being able to push each other to really great performances. And I guess this year it was like I guess Fuza was even with Esther like at the river. So yeah, 2nd through 10th, I guess they were really together. And I think it pushed them all to really great performances. So I would like to be like more part of the women's field like that. And I think that we're going to get closer and closer as the years go on. I don't think having a separate start time is really going to help that because it's everyone picking their own pace. And actually, there's been some like talk of proposing a separate start time for the women at UTMB, and I personally don't think this is a good idea. Right now, we don't have the density. It's just going to separate the fans. There's going to be fewer fans for either the men's or women's race, and someone's going to get upset. Like, it's complicated logistically. This isn't cycling. Like, we're not drafting each other. There's no peloton. I think what's cool about our sport is actually that there is less of a gap between the men and women, and it's really cool to see everyone being considered equally and not dividing it. Like, I remember when Courtney finished 7th at UTMB in 2021. That to me was so cool, like that she finished 7th, and I wouldn't want to change that because that is part of the sport for me.
So interesting. And yeah, I don't want to butcher the argument. I'm trying to kind of remember on the spot here what I was reading, but I think one of the arguments that was thrown out there for a separation of the fields was that if you separated the fields, perhaps on the women's side, you would see less instances where someone like you or Courtney so easily broke away from the field, and maybe there would be more fight, maybe there would be more chase, maybe more risk taking from people in like the 2nd through 10th position to stick with maybe and stay with you deeper and challenge. I mean, maybe one example that comes to mind is like watching Hardrock 2 years ago when you saw Annelise Rousset and Courtney kind of battle deep, although I guess that was a mixed start. But yeah, do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you buy that argument?
There's plenty of opportunity for the women to see each other at the start. Like, we all see each other. It's not like I was hiding between 20 men. Like, I can see the photos from the first 8K and like blending and yeah, like Emily are behind me. Like, you can see them. Like, I'm sure they can see me. I'm right in front of them. I don't think they lost sight of me, and that changed everything.
This was an amazingly historical year for the women's field, like the fastest cumulative top 10. I think the fastest podium. I don't know if you've had a chance to go back and watch some of the live stream or scroll through social to kind of get news on individual race reports, but do you have any initial thoughts either on, the days that like Ruth and Marianne had, or any ideas on what accounts for all the breakthroughs this year?
I don't think I would call it a breakthrough. It was very much expected to me that everyone would run that way. Like, it's just the trajectory we're on, and it's just another step this year. Nothing like, it doesn't surprise me at all. That's why I wanted to be here, because I knew that it was going to end up like that. Yeah, I mean, Ruth especially impressed me because this was her first UTMB. And I think admittedly, this isn't like the style of race she normally would excel at, even though she's won both OCC and CCC. Um, yeah, so she, and just her whole story from last year, having this like horrible virus right before the race and not getting to do the race, and then spending a whole another year training for it and having her first UTMB be the third fastest time. It's that to me is like the performance of the women's field. Um, yeah, it took me 4 tries to like get to this point. To see someone do that on their first try is kind of scary because we don't know what she's going to do next time.
This is a super hypothetical question, but I was thinking about it just before we hit record, and I wanted to ask it to you because, like you said earlier, you've had the experience of finishing in both the back half of the top 10 and finishing at the very front like this year. And I think at the current moment in the sport, like, yes, you expected what I just described as a breakthrough. That was totally, expected from your view about this year's performances. But what factors do you think best explain the difference between a 9th or a 10th place finish at this race and a podium? Like, is it purely a function of more focus and work? Is it something else? Given that you just mentioned that we don't quite have the density of field yet, or like the field that you would like to see, curious how you think about this difference.
Right now, I'm actually not totally sure because the because people finishing 9th and 10th are actually coming very well prepared and with like great training, great insight on the race. My first 2 performances wouldn't put me in the top 10 anymore. So I actually think that the podium is not that far out of reach from 9th, 10th, 8th. I think at that point you're just getting into like who was maybe managing the night. That can be a big separator if you're not used to that. Yeah, and maybe at that point you're looking more at just like pure fitness differences because I do think people are coming so well prepared for every other part of the race now. So I think if I were to finish like 10th or 9th right now, I would feel like, okay, just give me like a few more years of training and like I can be there on the podium. That's how they should feel, at least, because they're really not that far away. Even when you see like hour differences over the course of 176K, it's really not that much. You can find an hour more easily than you might think with just a few years.
I guess it would be really dependent on weather and maybe some other factors that you can't quite control for. But would you be surprised if a year from now or 2 years from now, like the entire women's top 10 is running under 24 hours, so they're completing the course in a day, and maybe the top 3, the podium is like everyone is running under 22:30? Are those ideas outrageous, or do you think it's happening that fast and like we're going to see like a super tight spread and everybody running under a day here?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to happen sometime soon. And of course, there's other factors like which races people end up going to. Yeah, mostly that where people want to put their effort and time, what sponsors are looking for, uh, who's really focused on this race. But that's definitely not out of the question. Just seeing how quickly things are improving. And yeah, we had pretty good weather this year, especially for the night. It was super nice. So like very little wind, no fog, so that helped keep things fast. But considering the same weather, I think in a few years for sure I think you'll see the whole top 10 under 24.
I know, like, especially after Western States last year, you talked about how one of your initial reactions was like, oh, wow, like I left so much time here. There was so much to improve here. I could have managed myself better over here. And that's like part of the excitement of wanting to come back. And maybe you weren't totally satisfied. How satisfied are you with this UTMB performance?
Oh, these are like the hard questions because I am very satisfied, but the thing that makes me want to keep doing this sport is that I'm never actually satisfied. So in most ways, I'm very satisfied, super happy. When I look at my whole my whole like running year, um, yeah, there's like, I'm so many things went right, and a lot of that is luck, and a lot of that is like luck that I created by being really focused on everything. Um, and what's tough is like only racing 3 races. You have to have those 3 days be good days. And I'm really happy that all of that went well. But then, of course, there's the part of me that's like, okay, where can I find 9 minutes on this course? Like, why did I totally explode in the last 2.5 hours? Why couldn't I have just like put one more gel in my mouth when I convinced myself I couldn't eat anymore? So yeah, there's those little things, but I have to remind myself like that's the stuff I take moving to next year that keeps me fired up. If I was 100% satisfied, then like I wouldn't have that same like desire, same motivation for future years.
I know we're only a week removed, but what would you say you learned about yourself out there in this year in particular?
This year in particular, I think I just found like uh, another like level of confidence. And I think I've said in other interviews, like in the past, I was kind of surprised when I would do something well. Like it surprised me, like, oh wow, I didn't know I could do that. And now I'm more like putting myself in situations where maybe in the past I wouldn't have been as confident in what I'm doing, and now I'm more like, no, I know I can do this. Like I'm doing this the way I want to do it. Um, yeah, I think that's the main difference. Just having like more experiences to look back on and be less surprised.
When you, and maybe you already mentioned it a moment ago with like identifying that whole section from Valor Scene onward to the finish, but when you think about going back into the figurative lab, either in this off season or early next year, and you're, talking with Coop, talking with your mom, maybe reverse engineering those last 10 miles and wondering what could have happened differently either in the lead up or in that moment. What does it come down to? Is it like, are you focused most on fixing something in your nutrition strategy? Is it something you could do in training to simulate? Is it a mindset thing? What do you think you'll be working on, or what questions are you going to be asking yourself?
Yeah, I think a lot of the first place to look would be nutrition, and if it was that, it was more like a stomach. I can't really tell if it was like stomach or diaphragm cramping, which I've had in the past too. But to have it only happen in the last 2 hours is pretty good for me. So in some ways, I have to take it as an improvement, but then see that there's still more room to improve. Yeah, those things are really hard to recreate in training. It's the type of thing you only get a chance to experience, in this case, once, because Western States is so much shorter than UTMB that I didn't have that issue this time. So it's something I've never been able to recreate in training, and it's always just like in the race where it comes up, and then you have to try to figure out why, and I've never really figured it out. I guess I imagine it's something to do with just trying to get more in at the end. Yeah, so that would be the first place. But I think there's some things you kind of have to just let go and understand you can't fix every tiny problem. And like some things there are no answers to, and it's just about like delaying the onset of it. And that's the best you can do sometimes. But of course, I'm still trying to find a solution.
We've asked this question to Jim Walmsley before, and I think we probably most recently asked it after Western States, but I said something like, when you have the highest level of success on the biggest stages and it's the performance is more close to perfect than it is to troubling. After that, what becomes intellectually stimulating or exciting to you from a career standpoint? And for Jim, it seemed like the answer at the top of the totem pole was just this idea of like, I'm going to keep defending these titles until I don't have them. This is where all of the competition congregates. That's where I want to be. If I had to guess, just based on what you've been saying, like for you, maybe it's more about like putting the pieces of the puzzle together and solving like this kind of like engineering problem of performance. Does that kind of track, or what is it for you that would make you want to keep coming back to UTMB or Western States, these bigger races in the years to come?
Yeah, I would agree with Jim's point. Well, I don't really think of it as defending titles. I think of it more as seeing if I can still stay in the game, because especially in the women's field, I mean the men's field too is increasing every year, like the competition, but the women, I think it's moving at a faster rate because we have more space to move. And just trying to stay with that, because even just improving at the same rate as everyone else is going to be hard to keep up with. So yeah, I think that's a motivator, is just trying to see if I can move in the same direction at the same rate as the rest of the competition. And I'm also like, I still haven't done that many races. Like there's still a lot of races that I want to do that inspire me. There's like a few projects or challenges I'd like to do. And yeah, I have so many ideas. And it's not just ultra running too. It's like, doing like shorter trail marathon stuff and going back to some races I did, like when I was first trail running in Europe in 2017, like Zigama or the Marathon du Mont Blanc or Sierre-Zinal again. I don't know, like all of those things get me excited. And so actually I have to kind of like figure out where to put my efforts, because I feel almost like there's too many fun things to do.
When you use the word projects, could something like an FKT attempt on Vermont's Long Trail fit into the mix?
I would love that. That would, I think, kill an entire year of running. So not kill, it would make it wonderful. It would mean it would be difficult to compete. And right now I'm kind of in Brett's mindset of people racing people. So I'm a little bit more inspired by competition right now, by like race day competition. But one day maybe, yeah, it's definitely enticing. Or even just doing the long trail as a hike again would be nice.
Brett got a lot of flack on social for that, so he'll feel super validated to be in your corner. Okay, so with Western States, with UTMB this year, are either of those performances still like prominently sticking in your head? Like, is there motivation to definitely go back, or is there a different primary goal for 2025, would you say?
For 2025, I don't believe I'll be back at Western States. I'd like to ski a bit later this year. I would like to try to get into Hardrock. I think I've said that enough times. I think Dale has heard me. So cross my fingers for that one. Hope that could become a reality. And yeah, I'm also intrigued by trying to make the US team for World Champs. I think that could fit together nicely, but these are just ideas right now, and we'll have to wait and see how the end of our year plays out, and yeah, what works for both of us in our calendar, what we're excited about.
I guess I'm wondering, because every time I ask the question of what's next, I cringe, because I do want to be firmly in the camp of appreciating things. Are you someone that's always looking forward, or are you pretty good at sitting with what you just did, soaking it up, and like totally, stepping away from the sport and relaxing or moving to skiing, stuff like that?
No, I'm always trying to look forward. I like kind of need something that keeps me like, yeah, it's the thing that like gets you out of bed in the morning, right? Like that gets you excited to think or to do something or to plan or even something to plan around. Uh, so actually this last week has been kind of weird because I don't have like an immediate plan in terms of my running, and I'm realizing like how maybe not important, but just what a huge part of just my like day to day those race goals become. That once I don't have one, it's kind of like it makes, I think any athlete would like understand, it kind of makes you wonder like who am I, what am I doing, like okay, I don't have a race, I don't have like a specific training to do, I don't have like a specific goal in mind right in the near future, like what do I do today? Which is also really nice because it gives me space to really decide what I want to do. And a lot of that this past week has just been kind of like doing nothing really, and it's been relaxing to do that in between some media requests, obviously. So yeah, I don't have an immediate goal. I would basically at this time of year we kind of like wait until it starts snowing. So sometime in November will be the next thing to get the skis out. Otherwise, it's just maybe seeing some family if I can convince them to come over here, or maybe go for a visit. But yeah, nothing like really specific.
Last question or topic before we close up. On the men's side, Vincent Bouillard winning the race was a huge deal for many reasons. One of them being the curiosity of our community, wondering what he'd do next. Specifically, does this radically change his lifestyle? Does he have a tough choice to make, wondering if he invests more into the athlete side, or does he continue striking some sort of equilibrium with his design career? And I find it fascinating. And I guess for you, I'm curious, when you go back to 2022, when you first won UTMB, and it was different for you, I'm sure, but do you remember the circumstances after the fact in terms of how things could or would change for you? And like, was it even that big of a deal? Like, am I being overly dramatic with sort of the stakes?
I think it's a little different in my case because I was already a professional athlete. So, and I was already in my in my contracts. So it wasn't like it was changing anything. Yeah, I would say the biggest change for me was after CCC in 2018. And then it kind of like confirmed that I could continue, or that I could like pursue a real kind of career as a professional athlete. But I was still a PhD student then. So it was still like a really long transition. So it wasn't as sharp. And even when I was second at CCC in 2018, I'd already like had some results before that like the French at least were aware of. So it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was as sharp as his kind of breakthrough. Yeah, his is like really truly a breakthrough. I don't feel like any of my results were truly a breakthrough. It was just like little steps every year.
Had you defended your thesis in the geology PhD? Like, was that in 2022, or was that, well, did I misremember the timeline? Was that like in like 21 or 20 or 19?
Yeah, I defended in June of 2022.
June of 22. Okay. But you had already decided like that was sort of, I was going to do that, but then I was firmly in like the pro trail runner camp.
I was already a professional, like
Okay.
I would already define myself as a professional athlete before 2022. Yeah, I was finishing like part-time, and my entire focus was on trail running.
Okay. Gotcha. So maybe one follow up on that. Like if we use the 2018 CCC as an example, when you finish on the podium in that race, when you finish, I think it was second, does sort of this career opportunity present itself as on like a golden platter? Is it like, hey, if you want to take this direction, that performance was super validating. and you don't have to turn back, or you don't have to wonder, like, do I keep trying to do things on an amateur level? Like, is it that decisive?
It wasn't like the one thing. It's basically we had an opportunity to maybe be professional athletes, and we were like kind of already in those conversations, and it kind of was like I feel like it was the last like check mark, like
Gotcha.
confirms we are serious. Like we have, because Jamal had finished fifth at CCC that year, so we were both in the top 5. So it was kind of like yep, this is real. Like we can do this. It wasn't this. It's not that the thing started there. It started before that, but yeah, not to go too into detail of timelines and stuff, but it was kind of like the confirmation. Like, all right, this is gonna work.
Gotcha. Well, Katie, it's been a pleasure to chat. I don't want. Well, I guess I don't mind. I'll reveal my bias. I was hoping you'd win. I'm a huge fan. Obviously, as a fellow Mainer, it's great to see someone from our state continue to perform at the highest levels. I hope you have a great off season too. I hope, in addition to skiing, there's hobbies you can do, and family you can reconnect with, etc. And we're looking forward to seeing what happens in 2025. Any final thoughts, or anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
No, I got nothing. Look forward to our next Eurotrack episode with the overview of the fall races. Yeah, but thanks to everyone who followed. Even just knowing people are behind their computers at home, even if you didn't send me a message, it means a lot to know there's people watching, and makes me feel like running with the camera guy for that long is worth it. So thanks.